Have you ever seen a student get roasted by a teacher? Be free to tell your own stories in the comment section. I had a blonde girl in class in junior high. Edit: this was someone who asked if April Fool's Day was in May. She never got jokes until it was way too late. One day, we walked into math class, there was a drawing on the whiteboard, looking something like this. Her, Mister, what is that on the board? A monkey. Teacher, no, it's a mirror. The class was roaring in laughter as she sat down, confused. Half an hour later, as Mister was waxing eloquent about fractions, she finally said, "Oh. We couldn't finish our lesson after that. My teacher was handing back our graded tests, and the first kid to receive his wasn't happy. He slumped back in his chair, miserable. Hey, what did ya get, John? Jake said. Jake was a real dick, the kid who considers himself well-liked but everyone hates. John didn't answer, so Jake snatched the test out of his hands and held it up. He laughed. 62. Jake yelled. How'd you get a 62? This test was light work, man. John sighed. Yes, how did you get a 62? Our teacher asked. Great, now she was joining in the fun. I'm really surprised, John. Poor John looked like he might cry. Because it's a very good grade, she continued. Especially considering what Jake got on his. Jake's mouth fell open, and Miss Smith held up Jake's test, a large 43 written on the front in red ink. Good job, John, Miss Smith said. Jake. Not so much. Iconic. A couple days ago in high school marketing class, one of my favorite classes because of how chill the setting is. The student always tries to annoy the teacher, so he ends up getting roasted all the time. It was the biggest roast by a teacher I've seen. Teacher, we're watching a movie. Student, trying to guess the movie, is it the 40-year-old virgin? Teacher, no, the class isn't going to watch a movie about your life. The whole class went insane after that. Kid was quiet for the rest of the class. First time I've ever seen him not speak. Roasts like this happens every day in this class, just never this good. Kid had it coming because of how much he says in that class. It's early in the year, so I guarantee more roasts will come towards this kid. I was being chased by a bully, and ducked into my algebra class just ahead of him. As I slid into my seat, the bully leaped onto my desk, waving a soda bottle, they were glass back then, and screaming. Suddenly he was yanked backwards and slammed into a wall. Mr. Connor, my teacher, looked at him with very mild confusion. You have to understand that Mr. Connor, who thought the world of numbers and truly enjoyed our class, was also the wrestling coach. He was short, about 5 feet 6 inches, and built like a fire hydrant, with a round face and red hair and freckles. He could have been a leprechaun. He had this boy pinned to the wall, about a 4-inch gap between the bottom of his feet and the floor. Mr. Stillwell, do you know where you are? Mr. Connor asks in a calm, slightly puzzled tone. Yes, coach, mumbled my assailant. And do you normally attend this class? No, coach. Are you under the influence of some drug, or poison I should know about, Mr. Stillwell? No, coach. Mr. Connor glanced at me, then turned back to the boy still dangling inches above the floor like a kitten. Perhaps, after due diligence and careful consideration, you thought this would increase your social standing with your fellow students, and impress me. He asked, almost hopeful. No, coach. Nothing like that, was Stillwell's subdued reply. Mr. Connor let him slide to the floor, one hand still on the nape of his neck. Mr. Connor turned and gestured at me. Mr. Harrison, walk with me and Mr. Stillwell as we go to the front office. I'd like to hear what you have to say about all this. And he turned and headed for the door as I gathered my books. The rest of the class sat mutely as the three of us left, Mr. Connor still holding Stillwell by the scruff of the neck. I wanted to have an answer to this for a while, but I just didn't. Then Spanish happened today. My Spanish teacher, Mr. Castro, called a guy named Kent up to the board to write down some of the answers. The goody-goody girl in the class, Summer, remarked that Kent had a hat on. Hats are theoretically taboo in my school. However, since a legendary prank a few years ago, Derek Corey's answer to what is the most pointless rule in your school, really only the administration cares. Mr. Castro is totally fine with it. The dress code in general is lax to the point of, if you're not butt naked, you're fine. Why did Summer pick a fight over a school policy that hasn't been enforced in years? I have no clue. Back to the offending hat. A Cubs cap, to be precise. Kent's a quiet guy. He looked at Mr. Castro to see the executive decision. It's a violation of dress code, Summer said. Mr. Castro sighed. Kent, return to your desk and please remove the hat. Summer, will you finish the sentence on the board instead? It's worth pointing out at this point that Summer was wearing a crop top, sweatshirt. After she stood up, Mr. Castro started writing on a little yellow pad that any student who's gotten a detention is intimately familiar with. Summer, he said, as she got back to her seat. You have a lunch detention today for violating the dress code. Why? She said in confident voice. No one cares about the dress code. Mr. Castro shrugged. You did, about 5 seconds ago, he said. Boom. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel for similar questions and answers. This is my first video, so sorry if anything was wrong.